Serenator, my darling, hello. We're just starting Twitch and I am beginning TikTok. How are you tonight, my darling? Lovely to see you and make your acquaintance once more tonight. All right, so TikTok is not going to be our friend tonight, but that's quite all right. Here we go. TikTok is live.
I am the stone that the builder refused.
Oh, goodness me.
I am the visual, the inspiration.
Hello, all my friends. Good evening to you.
When my family moved to the new
Haha. I'm getting my own monitor going. All right, here we are. Does it show that I'm live yet? Yes, it does. Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. All right, let's take a look here. Scream Queen! I forgot I was waiting for the stream to start. Nearly had a heart attack when you started talking. Oh my goodness. Doing very well, thank you. Oh, I do see that we are here with a hot sauce passion. I see that, indeed I do. And how is everyone on the TikTok tonight? I do hope that everyone is enjoying themselves this evening, yes. Well, hello everyone. Now, TikTok, I must say, hello and to Sandman. Mr. Sandman, wonderful to see you and make your acquaintance once again this evening. Ah, my goodness, well, keep tapping that screen, TikTok. It would be such a pleasure to have the more the merrier. It was a total who's in my house moment. Oh my goodness, well, isn't that quite apropos for what we do round here? My goodness. Sweet greetings, great salutations. Hello. Oh, Amber's here. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so very much, everyone, for tapping the screen. And let's see, tonight we have quite the tale that I've been promising you for quite some time. And if you are new here, hello. My name is Siren. However, on Thursday evenings, I moonlight as the Lady Scarlett Nightshade in the House of Nightshade and Company, regaling you with tales, demonstrating my voiceover work and different accents that I do. Yes, hello, my lady. Hello, Emmeline. Wonderful to see you tonight. All right, so I'm manning the chats. I see everybody's chats. I can actually see everyone. Can you see me? Can you see me and hear me? I must know, simply must know. Every Thursday evening, I'll continue on with my spiel here. Every Thursday evening, I regale you with tales out of my wonderful grimoire. And the grimoire does have new stickers on it from time to time. Everything seems fantastically spectacular. Wonderful, Sandman. Well, it is quite wonderful that you are here. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to share, whether you are on Twitch or on the TikTok. Looks great. Thank you, Emmeline. Jasper Jordan, Terry Ward. Ah, wonderful. All good here on Twitch. Wonderful. You can see and hear. Fabulous. Wonderful. All right. So, I'm feeling quite good about this as well. I'm quite excited. Thank you so very much for following The Real Tiffany. Hello. Published writer and artist and love wonderful stories. Oh, wonderful. Well, I will say tonight we are not reading an original tale. Tonight, I am doing what my patrons on Patreon have been promised. And this evening we shall be reading the glorious, glorious tale of the legend of Sleepy Hollow. by Washington Irving, a classic and most apropos to ring in the holiday season. Brie Allen, hello, how are you this evening, darling? Lovely to see you and make your acquaintance once more. All right. So, oh, I see popcorn emojis. I see emojis happening on TikTok. Twitch, can you be in competition with TikTok and flood the chat with all the emojis that you can think of? Lurking. All right. Well, a lurk is just as good. All right, everyone. If you're ready to hear the tale, then we are certainly ready to read it. In thought and theory, we are horsing around. Yes, we are horsing around. Darling. Oh, that's delightful, Sandman. Oh, I see all of those emojis on Twitch. Uh-oh, TikTok, Twitch has you beat. You'd better hurry up and flood that chat with emojis to hear the tale. Ooh, my goodness, we've suddenly had a competition. Haunted aubergines on TikTok. Did you know that we have a haunted aubergine on Twitch? It's an actual emoji that we invented specifically for the Twitch stream. Indeed we have. Oh, I see pandas, dancing pandas. Yes, wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, we certainly have quite a bit of an audience here, don't we? Top hats, aha, I do see that. I see the siren emojis happening on Twitch. Oh, this is wonderful. Bats and hats, ooh, and horses. Headless horseman, ah, I get it, I understand. Don't forget to keep tapping that screen. Share the live with everyone you can think of. In addition to regaling you with tales, I would certainly love to have someone new join us on Patreon tonight. We have a very small goal of 2 new patrons tonight. Oh my goodness, I do see them. Oh, the Lady Scarlett Nightshade emoji's there. Oh, thank you, Serenator. Oh my goodness, all those emojis. Wonderful. Well, keep those chats rolling. Don't forget, Twitch, you also have commands active. Please take advantage of them. And I am going to open the grimoire and we are going to start the tale, yes. And look at the wonderful cover on this one. My goodness. The suspense is galloping along. Oh, Sandman, you're on one tonight, aren't you? All right. Washington Irving's The Legend of the Sleepy Hollow. Let's get right into it then, shall we? The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. A pleasing land of drowsy head it was, of dreams that wave before the half-shut eye, and a gay castles in the clouds that pass, forever flashing round a summer sky. Castle of Indolence. In the bosom of one of those spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson, at the broad expansion of the river denominated by the ancient Dutch navigators the Tappan Zee, and where they always prudently shortened sail and implored the protection of St. Nicholas when they crossed, there lies a small market town or rural port, which is by some called Greensboro, but which is more generally and properly known by the name of Tarrytown. This name was given, we are told, in former days, by the good housewives of the adjacent country, from the inveterate propensity of their husbands to linger about the village tavern on market days. Be that as it may, I do not vouch for the fact, but merely advert to it, for the sake of being precise and authentic. Not far from this village, perhaps about 2 miles, there is a valley, or rather lap of land among high hills, which is one of the quietest places in the whole world. A small brook glides through it, with just murmur enough to lull one to repose, and the occasional whistle of a quail or tapping of a woodpecker is almost the only sound that ever breaks in upon the uniform tranquillity. I recollect that, when a stripling, my first exploit in squirrel shooting was in a grove of tall walnut trees that shades one side of the valley. I had wandered into it at noontime, when all nature is peculiarly quiet, and was startled by the roar of my own gun, as it broke the Sabbath stillness round, and was prolonged and reverberated by the angry echoes. If ever I should wish for a retreat whither I might steal from the world and its distractions, or dream quietly away the remembrance of a troubled life, I know of none more promising than this little valley. From the listless repose of the place, and the peculiar character of its inhabitants, who are descendants from the original Dutch settlers, the sequestered glen has long been known by the name of Sleepy Hollow, and its rustic lads are called the Sleepy Hollow Boys throughout all the neighbouring country. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land, and to pervade the very atmosphere. Some say the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the early days of the settlement. Others, that an old Indian chief, the prophet or wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there before the country was discovered by Master Hendrik Hudson. Certain it is, the place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to walk in a continual reverie. They are given to all kinds of marvelous beliefs, are subject to trances and visions, and frequently see strange sights, and hear music and voices in the air. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales, haunted spots, and twilight superstitions. Stars shoot and meteors glare oftener across the valley than in any other part of the country, and the nightmare, with her whole ninefold, seems to make it the favorite scene of her gambols. The dominant spirit, however, that haunts this chanted region, and seems to be the commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air, is the apparition of a figure on horseback, without a head. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper, whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk hurrying along in the gloom of night, as if on the wings of a wind. His haunts are not confined to the valley, but extend at times to the adjacent roads, and especially to the vicinity of a church at no great distance. Indeed, certain of the most authentic historians and those parts, who have been careful in collecting and collating the floating facts concerning the spectre, allege that the body of the trooper having been buried in the churchyard, the ghost rides forth to the scene of battle in nightly quest of his head, and that the rushing speed with which he sometimes passes along the hollow, like a midnight blast, is owing to his being belated, and in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak. Pure Blood, hello. Oh, thank you so very much for following me. I do appreciate it, and I know that Siren will as well. Yes, I shall presently let her know that we do have new follows to the stream. Thank you, TikTok. Such is the general purport of this legendary superstition, which has furnished materials for many a wild story in that region of shadows, and the spectre is known at all the country firesides by the name of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. It is remarkable that the visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconsciously imbibed by everyone who resides there for a time. However wide awake they may have been before they entered that sleepy region, they are sure, in a little time, to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow imaginative, to dream dreams and see apparitions. I mention this peaceful spot with all possible laud, for it is in such little retired Dutch valleys, found here and there embosomed in the great state of New York, that population, manners, and customs remain fixed, while the great torrent of migration and improvement, which is making such incessant changes in other parts of the restless country, sweeps by them unobserved. They are like those little nooks of still water, which border a rapid stream, where we may see the straw and bubble riding quietly at anchor, or slowly revolving in their mimic harbour, undisturbed by the rush of a passing current. Through many years have elapsed since I trod the drowsy shades of Sleepy Hollow, yet I question whether I should not still find the same trees and the same families vegetating in its sheltered bosom. In this byplace of nature there abode, in a remote period of American history, that is to say, some 30 years since, a worthy wight of a name of Ichabod Crane, who sojourned, or, as he expressed it, tarried in Sleepy Hollow, for the purpose of instructing the children of the vicinity. He was a native of Connecticut, a state which supplies the Union with pioneers for the mind as well as for the forest, and sends forth yearly its legions of frontier woodsmen and country schoolmasters. The cognomen of Crane was not inapplicable to his person. He was tall, but exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snipe nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon the spindle neck to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. His schoolhouse was a low building of one large room, rudely constructed of logs, the windows partly glazed, and partly patched with leaves of old copybooks. It was most ingeniously secured at vacant hours by a withe twisted in the handle of the door, and stakes set against the window shutters, so that though a thief might get in with perfect ease, he would find some embarrassment in getting out, an idea most probably borrowed by the architect Joost van Houten from a mystery of an ale-pot. The schoolhouse stood in a rather lonely but pleasant situation, just at the foot of a woody hill, with a brook running close by, and a formidable birch tree growing at one end of it. From hence the low murmur of his pupils' voices, conning over their lessons, might be heard in the drowsy summer's day, like the hum of a beehive. interrupted now and then by the authoritative voice of the master, in the tone of menace or command, or, peradventure, by the appalling sound of the birch, as he urged some tardy loiterer along with the flowery path of knowledge. Truth to say, he was a conscientious man, and never bore in mind the golden maxim, spare the rod and spoil the child. Ichabod Crane's scholars certainly were not spoiled. He didn't notify you? Oh, goodness, darling. Well, we certainly must fix that at some point. Please fix your notifications if you must, darling. Thank you so very much for all the follows and all the likes and all the shares. I do appreciate it ever so much. And I do know that Siren shall as well. I shall tell her presently, as soon as the story ends and the stream is finished for the evening. I always report back to her, you know. Being the librarian and the historian of the Siren Grotto, I certainly must keep tabs and keep record. Leave the math to me, as they say. I would not have it imagined, however, that he was one of those cruel potentates of the school who joy in the smart of their subjects. On the contrary, he administered justice with discrimination rather than severity, taking the burden off the backs of the weak and laying it on those of the strong. Your mere puny stripling that winced at the least flourish of the rod was passed by with indulgence. But the claims of little tough, wrong-headed, broad-skirted Dutch urchin, who sulked and swelled and grew dogged and sullen beneath the birch, all this he called doing his duty by their parents, and he never inflicted a chastisement without following it by the assurance, so consolatory to the smarting urchin, that he would remember it and thank him for it the longest day he had to live. Well, hello, Lonnie. Welcome to see. Lovely to see you tonight. When the school hours were over, he was even the companion and playmate of the larger boys, and on holiday afternoons would convoy some of the smaller ones home, who happened to have pretty sisters, or good housewives for mothers, noted for the comforts of the cupboard. Indeed, it behoved him to keep on good terms with his pupils. The revenue arising from his school was small, and would have been scarcely sufficient to furnish him with daily bread, for he was a huge feeder, and, though lank, had the dilating powers of an anaconda. But, to help out his maintenance, he was, according to the country custom in those parts, boarded and lodged at the houses of the farmers whose children he instructed. With these he lived successively, a week at a time, thus going the rounds of the neighbourhood, with all his worldly effects tied up in the cotton handkerchief. That all this might not be too onerous in the purses of his rustic patrons, who are apt to consider the costs of schooling a grievous burden, and schoolmasters as mere drones, he had various ways of rendering himself both useful and agreeable. He assisted the farmers occasionally on the lighter labours of their farms, helped to make hay, mended the fences, took the horses to water, drove the cows from pasture, and cut wood for the winter fire. He laid aside, too, all the dominant dignity and absolute sway with which he lorded it in his little empire, the school, and became wonderfully gentle and ingratiating. He found favour in the eyes of the mothers by petting the children, particularly the youngest, and, like the lion bold, which whilom so magnanimously the lamb did hold, he would sit with the child on one knee, and rock and cradle with his foot for whole hours together. Hello, welcome everyone, welcome to Twitch and welcome to TikTok. Lovely to see you all tonight. Thank you so very much for all of the likes and the shares and tapping the screen, waving hello to me with all of your phalanges. It certainly does help. Oh yes, indeed it does. Thank you so very much for the roses, rock guitarist. Wonderful to see you tonight. Thank you so very much. It's snowing and making you grumpy. Oh, darling, I would die for the snow. Thank you. Thank you for sending a little gift. I do appreciate it. All right, let's go back to the story, shall we? Thank you everyone for being here. I do appreciate it ever so very much. In addition to his other vocations, he was the singing master of the neighborhood, and picked up many bright shillings by instructing the young folks in psalmody. It was a matter of no little vanity to him on Sundays to take his station in front of the church gallery with a band of chosen singers, where, in his own mind, he completely carried away the palm from the parson. Certain it is, his voice resounded far above all the rest of the congregation, and there are peculiar quavers still to be heard in that church, and which may even be heard half a mile off, quite to the opposite side of the mill pond, on a still Sunday morning, which are said to be legitimately descended from the nose of Ichabod Crane. Thus, by divers little makeshifts, and in that ingenious way which is commonly denominated by hook and by crook, the worthy pedagogue got on tolerably enough, and was thought, by all who understood nothing of the labour of head work, to have a wonderfully easy life of it. The schoolmaster is generally a man of some importance in the female circle of a rural neighbourhood, being considered a kind of idle, gentlemanlike personage, of vastly superior taste and accomplishments to the rough country swains, and indeed inferior in learning only to the parson. His appearance, therefore, is apt to occasion some little stir at the tea-table of a farmhouse, and the addition of supernumerary dish of cakes or sweetmeats, or peradventure the parade of a silver teapot. Our man of letters, therefore, was peculiarly happy in the smiles of all the country damsels. How he would figure among them in the churchyard, between services on Sundays, gathering grapes from them, from the wild vines that overran the surrounding trees, reciting, for their amusement, all the epitaphs on the tombstones, or sauntering with a whole bevy of them along the banks of the adjacent mill pond, whilst the more bashful country bumpkins hung sheepishly back, envying his superior elegance and address. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness, thank you so very much for following. Thank you. And speaking of the silver teapot, cheers to all. Please let me know what's in your cup this evening. I have a lovely mixture of Starbucks and vanilla creamer. Sugar-free, fat-free, fun-free, always. Cheers. Ran out of the belladonna. Oh, goodness, well. I know, unfortunately. Well, in the house of Nightshade. Belladonna in the cup certainly would be appropriate. However, I have heard that the potato and the coffee bean are both considered nightshade plants. ice water in mine. All right, well, Crystal, I will certainly accept it. Siren, hello, darling. How are you this evening? Wonderful to make your acquaintance. Though tonight it's not Siren, it's the Lady Scarlett Nightshade every Thursday evening here on Twitch and on TikTok, regaling you with tales. Chocolate chip brown buttered Whole House cookie and oh my goodness, that sounds wonderful. Oh, goodness me. Doing well, my dear. How are you? I'm doing quite well. Thank you so very much for asking. Tonight, if you're just joining us, hello. Tonight we are reading The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is by request of the wonderful, elegant savages of Patreon. In order to make your request for readings or for songs, be sure to check out the link to Patreon in the bios. Yes. My goodness, darling. I shall certainly address you either way. I'm surprised, Amber, that it's not brownie milk. All right, then. So, we've met Ichabod Crane now, and we've learnt a little bit about Sleepy Hollow, otherwise known as Terror Town. And so, now we're learning more about Ichabod Crane. From his half-itinerant life, also, he was kind of travelling gazette, carrying the whole budget of local gossip from house to house, so that his appearance was always greeted with satisfaction. He was, moreover, esteemed by the women as a man of great erudition, for he had read several books quite through, and was a perfect master of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft, in which, by the way, he most firmly and potently believed. Sounds like a bit like the merfolk and the elegant savages, doesn't it? He was, in fact, an odd mixture of small shrewdness and simple credulity. His appetite for the marvellous and his powers of digesting it were equally extraordinary, and both had been increased by his residence in the spellbound region. No tale was too gross or monstrous for his capacious swallow. It was often his delight, after his school was dismissed in the afternoon, to stretch himself on the rich bed of clover bordering the little brook that whimpered by his schoolhouse, and there con over old Mather's direful tales, until the gathering dusk of evening made the printed page a mere mist before his eyes. Hello. Then, as he wended his way by swamp and stream and awful woodland to the farmhouse where he happened to be quartered, every sound of nature at that witching hour fluttered his excited imagination. The moan of the whippoorwill from the hillside, the boding cry of the tree-toad. Thank you so very much again for the chairs, darling. It is wonderful to see you. Thank you. The boding cry of the tree-toad, that harbinger of storm, the dreary hooting of the screech owl, or the sudden rustling in the thicket of birds frightened from the roost. There are fireflies, too, which sparked most vividly in the darkest places, now and then startled him, as one of the uncommon brightness would stream across his path. And if, by chance, the huge blockhead of a beetle came winging his blundering flight against him, The poor varlet was ready to give up the ghost, with the idea that he was struck with a witch's token. His only resource on such occasions, either to drown thought or drive away evil spirits, was to sing psalm tunes, and the good people of Sleepy Hollow, as they sat by their doors for the evening, were often filled with awe at hearing his nasal melody. In linked sweetness long drawn out, floating from the distant hill, or along the dusky road. Another of his sources of fearful pleasure was to pass long winter evenings with the old Dutch wives, as they sat spinning by the fire, with a row of apples roasting and spluttering along the hearth, and listen to their marvellous tales of ghosts and goblins, and haunted fields, and haunted brooks, and haunted bridges, and haunted houses, and particularly of the Headless Horseman, or Galloping Hessian of the Hollow, as they sometimes called him. He would delight them equally by his anecdotes of witchcraft, and of the direful omens and portentous sights and sounds in the air, which prevailed in the earlier times of Connecticut, and would frighten them woefully with speculations upon comets and shooting stars, and with the alarming fact that the world did absolutely turn round, and that they were half the time topsy-turvy. But if there was pleasure in all this, while snugly cuddling in the chimney corner of a chamber that was all of a ruddy glow from the crackling wood fire, and where, of course, no spectre dared show its face, it was dearly purchased by the terrors of his subsequent walk homewards. What fearful shapes and shadows beset his path amidst the dim and ghastly glare of the snowy night? With that wistful look did he eye every trembling ray of light streaming across the waste fields from some distant window. How often was he appalled by some shrub covered with snow, which, like a sheeted spectre, beset his very path. How often did he shrink with curdling awe at the sound of his own steps on the frosty crust beneath his feet, and dread to look over his shoulder, lest he should behold some uncouth being tramping close behind him. And how often was he thrown into complete dismay by some rushing blast, howling amongst the trees, in the idea that it was the galloping Hessian of one of his nightly scourings. Phoenix, hello, my dear. Wonderful to see you tonight. How are you? And I see that the Lady Darcy has joined us. Thank you so very much for sharing the live, and thank you so very much for the gifts. Oh, I do appreciate it ever so much. Twitch and TikTok, as a matter of fact, have been just simply alive with chatting and emojis and gifts and sharing and all of the wonderful commands on Twitch. My goodness, quite literally my favourite story. Your night is made well, Scream Queen. I do appreciate hearing that from you as well, darling. I'm so happy to see all of you tonight. Had a long day and was late to your first job. Oh, goodness, Phoenix, darling. Well, I must say we are waiting eagerly for you to join the Discord server of the Siren Grotto. We would love so very much to share with you in all of the daily pains and pleasures. All right, wonderful. Well, we are working ever so robustly on The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. And we are walking at the winter's night with Ichabod Crane home to his farmhouse after school and dinner with one of his schoolmates' parents, I suppose. All these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in darkness, and though he had seen many spectres in his time, had been more than once beset by Satan in divers shapes, in his lonely perambulations, yet daylight put an end to all these evils, and he would have passed a pleasant life of it, in despite of the devil and all his works, if his path had not been crossed by a being that causes more perplexity to mortal man than ghosts, goblins, and the whole race of witches put together, and that was a woman. Among the musical disciples who assembled, one evening was in each week to receive his instruction in psalmody was Katrina Van Tassel, his daughter and only child of a substantial Dutch farmer. She was a blooming lass of a fresh 18, plump as a partridge, ripe and melting and rosy-cheeked as one of her father's peaches, and universally famed not merely for her beauty, but for her vast expectations. She was withal a little of a coquette, as might be perceived even in her dress, which was a mixture of ancient and modern fashion, as most suited to set off her charms. She wore the ornaments of pure yellow gold, which her great-great-grandmother had brought over from Sardam, the tempting stomacher of the olden time, and withal a provokingly short petticoat, to display the prettiest foot and ankle in the country round. Ichabod Crane had a soft and foolish heart towards the sex, and it is not to be wondered that so tempting a morsel soon found favour in his eyes, more especially after he had visited her in her paternal mansion. Old Baltus Von Tassel was a perfect picture of a thriving, contented, liberal-hearted farmer. He seldom, it is true, sent either his eyes or his thoughts beyond the boundaries of his own farm, but within those everything was snug, happy, and well-conditioned. He was satisfied with his wealth, not proud of it, and piqued himself upon the hearty abundance rather than in the style in which he lived. His stronghold was situated on the banks of the Hudson, in one of those green, sheltered, fertile nooks in which the Dutch farmers were so fond of nestling. A great elm tree spread its broad branches over it, and the foot of which bubbled up a spring of the softest and sweetest water, in a little well formed of a barrel, and then stole sparkling way through the grass to a neighbouring brook that babbled along among alders and dwarf willows. Hard by the farmhouse was a vast barn that might have served for a church, every window and crevice of which seemed bursting forth with the treasures of the farm. The flail was busily resounding within it from morning to night. Swallows and martins skimmed twittering about the eaves, and rows of pigeons, with one eye turned up as if watching the weather, some with their heads under their wing or buried in their bosoms, and others swelling and cooing and bowing about their dames, were enjoying the sunshine on the roof. Sleek, unwieldy porkers were grunting in the repose and abundance of their pens, from whence sallied forth, now and then, troops of sucking pigs, as if to snuff the air. A stately squadron of snowy geese were riding in the adjoined pond, convoying whole fleets of ducks. Regiments of turkeys were gobbling through the farmyard, and guinea fowls fretting about it like ill-tempered housewives, with their peevish, discontented cry. Before the barn door strutted the gallant cock, that pattern of a husband, a warrior and a fine gentleman, clapping his burnished wings and crowing in the pride and gladness in his heart, sometimes tearing up the earth with his feet, and then generously calling his ever-hungry family of wives and children to enjoy the rich morsel which he had discovered. Thank you so very much for the follows. My goodness, this chat is rolling right along. got a necklace from Heather's shop today. Oh my goodness, thank you, Darcy, that's wonderful. So you've received your wares from the House of Nightshade then, as it were? Wonderful, how delightful. And did it arrive all in one piece? We made sure to bubble wrap the ever-living bejesus out of that little piece, that poor little snow globe. My goodness, it must have been suffocating on the journey all the way to your home. I like fog as long as I don't have to drive in it. I'm one that would cause an accident. Oh, goodness, please don't cause any accidents on the road. My goodness, darling. Oh, you wore it today. That's delightful. Oh, goodness, good. So that means it arrived all in one piece. No, ma'am. Oh, darling, no. Please don't. Yes, please, post some pictures. It was the cutest and got so many compliments. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, don't forget as well, you get discounts and free merchandise by joining the Siren Grotto. You always think the most when it's foggy out. Oh, that's interesting, Phoenix. Please do tell us about it. You think of the mist. Oh, the mist, yes. Do you know, I think of Silent Hill. I must say, Siren's younger brother, his claim to fame is on YouTube, and he virtually broke the internet, I must say, on a 4.5-hour explainer video about Twin Peaks, the television series. And before that, he wrote, filmed, and directed a 23-part series on Silent Hill, and all of the drama that video game series brought forth. Always think of Harry Potter. Oh yes, darling. Oh, it's winter. Oh yes, absolutely. That is the time. As a matter of fact, we are getting ready to put up our holiday decorations, and we are still in preparation and premiering haunted holiday items in the House of Nightshade. And that website, if you do wish to peruse the wares, is nightshadeand.co. Isn't that clever? Not .com, but .co. Nightshadeand.co. All right, and if you are just joining us, thank you so very much for being here. My name, every other night of the week, is Sirenofsound, though on Thursday evenings I moonlight as the Lady Scarlett Nightshade to regale you with tales, demonstrate our voiceover work that I do, and enjoy it ever so much performing for you in this character. Yes. All right then. Let's continue on with the story of Ichabod Crane in the legend of Sleepy Hollow. But before then, let's all take a break, take a sip, and tap the screen 3 times when you've done so. Who is that again? You might have to check it out. Oh, goodness, Scream Queen. Well, that is Nightshade and Company. That's my jewellery company. I am, after all, the spokeswoman as the Lady Scarlett Nightshade from the House of Nightshade. Nightshade and Company started in 1617 as a vampiric front for a vampire clan, and my father, Lord Balthazar Nightshade, ran off with a werewolf, Lady Isolde Wolfsbane, into the woods and built a mansion to raise me. If that's not a tale of forbidden love, I don't know what is. Cheers! All right, my darlings, let's continue the story. The pedagogue's mouth watered as he looked upon this sumptuous promise of luxurious winter fare. In his devouring mind's eye, he pictured to himself every roasting pig running about with a pudding in his belly and an apple in his mouth. The pigeons were snugly put to bed in a comfortable pie and tucked in with their coverlet of crust. The geese were swimming in their own gravy, and the ducks pairing cosily in dishes like snug married couples, with a decent competency of onion sauce. In the porkers he saw carved out the future sleek side of bacon, and juicily relishing ham. Not a turkey, but he beheld daintily dressed up, with its gizzard under its wing, and, peradventure, a necklace of savoury sausage, and even bright Chanticleer himself lay sprawling on his back in the side dish, with uplifted claws, as if craving that quarter which his chivalrous spirit disdained to ask whilst living. As the enraptured Ichabod fancied all this, and as he rolled his great green eyes over the fat meadowlands, the rich fields of wheat, of rye, of buckwheat, and Indian corn, and the orchards burdened with ruddy fruit, which surrounded the warm tenement of Van Tassel, his heart yearned after the damsel who was to inherit this domain, and his imagination expanded with the idea how they might be readily turned into cash, and the money invested in immense tracts of wild land, and shingle palaces in the wilderness. Nay, his busy fancy already realized his hopes, and presented to him the blooming Katrina, with a whole family of children mounted on the top of a wagon loaded with household trumpery, with pots and kettles dangling beneath. And he beheld himself bestriding a pacing mare with a colt at her heels, setting out for Kentucky, Tennessee, or Lord knows where. When he entered the house, the conquest of his heart was complete. It was one of those spacious farmhouses, which high-ridged but slowly sloping roofs, built in the style handed down from the first Dutch settlers, the low projecting eaves forming a piazza along the up front, capable of being closed up in bad weather. Under this were flung flails, harness, various utensils of husbandry, and nets for fishing in the neighbouring river. Benches were built along the sides for summer use, and a great spinning wheel at one end and a churn at the other showed the various uses to which this important torch might be devoted. From this piazza the wandering Ichabod entered the hall, which formed the centre of the mansion and the place of usual residence. Here rows of resplendent pewter ranged along the dresser, dazzled his eyes. On one corner stood a huge bag of wool, ready to be spun. In another, the quantity of Lindsley woolsey just from the loom, ears of Indian corn, and strings of dried apples and peaches hung in gay festoons along the walls, mingled with the gourd of red peppers. And a door left ajar gave him a peep into the best parlour, where the claw-footed chairs and dark mahogany tables shone like mirrors. Andirons, with their accompanying shovel and tongs, glistened from the covert of asparagus tops. Mock oranges and conch shells decorated the mantelpiece. Strings of various coloured birds' eggs were suspended above it, and great ostrich egg was hung from the centre of the room, and a corner cupboard, knowingly left open, displayed immense treasures of old silver and well-mended china. Where in the hell is Mooney? Good question. Fetch her at once. Fetch her at once, and she'll receive the birch next time. From the moment Ichabod laid his eyes upon these regions of delight, the peace of his mind was at an end, and his only study was how to gain the affections of the peerless daughter of Van Tassel. In this enterprise, however, he had more real difficulties than generally fell to the lot of a knight-errant of yore, who seldom had anything but giants enchanters, fiery dragons, and such likely easily conquered adversaries, to attend with, and had to make his way merely through gates of iron and brass, and walls of adamant to the castle keep, where the lady of his heart was confined. All which he achieved as easily as a man would carve his way to the centre of a Christmas pie. And then the lady gave him her hand as a matter of course. Ichabod, on the contrary, had to win his way to the heart of a country coquette, beset with a labyrinth of whims and caprices, which were forever presenting new difficulties and impediments. And he had to encounter a host of fearful adversaries of real flesh and blood, the numerous rustic admirers who beset every portal to her heart, keeping a watchful and angry eye upon each other, but ready to fly out in the common cause against any new competitor. Among these, the most formidable was a burly, roaring, roistering blade by the name of Abraham, or, according to the Dutch abbreviation, Brom van Brunt, a hero of the country round, which rang with his feats of strength and hardihood. He was broad-shouldered and double-jointed, with a short, curly black hair, and a bluff but not unpleasant countenance, having a mingled air of fun and arrogance. From his Herculean frame and the great powers of limb, he had received the nickname of Brom Bones, by which he was universally known. He was famed for great knowledge and skill in horsemanship, being as dexterous on horseback as a Tartar. He was foremost at all races and cockfights, and, with the ascendancy which bodily strength always acquires in rustic life, was the umpire in all disputes, setting his hat on one side, and giving his decisions with an air and tone that admitted of no gainsay or appeal. He was always ready for either a fight or a frolic, but he had more mischief than ill will in his composition, and, with all his overbearing roughness, there was a strong dash of waggish good humour at bottom. He had 3 or 4 boon companions who regarded him as their model, and at the head of whom he scoured the country, attending every scene of feud or merriment for miles round. In cold weather, he was distinguished by a fur cap, surmounted with the flaunting foxtail, and when the folks at the country gathering descried this well-known crest at a distance, whisking about among the quad of hard riders, they always stood by for a squall. Sometimes his crew would be heard dashing along past the farmhouses at midnight, with whoop and hello and a troop of Don Cossacks, and the cold dames, startled out of their sleep, would listen for a moment till the hurry-scurry had clattered by, and then exclaim, "Aye, there goes Brom Bones and his gang." The neighbours looked upon him with a mixture of awe, admiration, and goodwill, and when any madcap prank or rustic brawl occurred in the vicinity, always shook their heads and warranted Brom Bones was at the bottom of it. Everyone is coming in. My goodness, thank you so very much for being here. Twitch and on TikTok. Thank you so very much, all. It is a pleasure to make all of your acquaintances tonight. Every other night of the week, I am Sirenofsound, but on Thursday evenings, I am the Lady Scarlett Nightshade, regaling you with tales from the grimoire, and tonight's tale is one by request of the elegant savages of Patreon, which is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. So please settle in with your tea, your hot chocolate, whatever you desire to sup and sip. And I am going to have my little blanket. I must be surrounded by little creature comforts and textile at all times. I am indeed one of those. All right then. What am I having to drink? Such a classic, yes 'tis. I am having coffee, and tonight it's a delightful Starbucks Italian roast with sugar-free, fat-free, fun-free, everything-free vanilla creamer from the discount shop in my vampire cup. Very befitting a vampire-like and hybrid such as myself. Also, if you're on Twitch, speaking of drinking things, please do not cash in hydrate, because in typical fashion, I have no water. I get enough of it. I live in the grotto, after all, in the West Wing Library. Righto then. Are you all enjoying the story so far? You're having herbal tea. That sounds delightful. I do hope that you're all enjoying the story. I am having quite a wonderful time reading it to you. You are you're loving the story? On your best behavior, everyone. Oh my goodness, well, I certainly don't call for best behavior, only the Queen's English. Loving the story, wonderful, Darcy. Oh, such a delight to see all of you and to be entertaining you this evening. And don't forget, thank you so very much for liking and sharing and commenting and doing all of the good audience chatty things on Twitch and on the TikTok. It is very much appreciated. And if you are so inclined and would like to receive long format stories in addition to the 2-sentence terrors that I publish on social media, please consider a membership of Patreon and becoming an elegant savage today. We start at a mere $5 per month, and we offer free trials. A 7-day free trial, which means you can come in and enjoy us for 7 days. That's one entire week for free. That is how confident we are that you would be delighted by all of the wonderful benefits on the Siren Grotto Patreon. You're always on your best behavior. Oh my goodness, Scream Queen, never such a lie was told. All right then. Stop telling porkies in the chat. All right then. Let's continue on with the tale, shall we? The tale of Ichabod Crane, the legend of Sleepy Hollow. The Rantipole hero had for some time singled out the blooming Katrina for the object of his uncouth gallantries, and though his amorous toyings were something like the gentle caresses and endearments of a bear, yet it was whispered she did not altogether discourage his hopes. Certain it is, his advances were signals for rival candidates to retire, who felt no inclination to cross a lion in his armours, insomuch that when his horse was seen tied to Van Tassel's paling on a Sunday night, the sure sign that his master was courting, or, as it is termed, sparking, within, all other suitors passed by in despair, and carried the war into other quarters. Love the story. I do as well. Do pardon me. I must be honest with you and let you know that I fed right before jumping on stream tonight. And so, while I'm quite sated, I'm also a little loud. Such was the formidable rival with whom Ichabod Crane had to contend, and, considering all things, a stouter man than he would have shrunk from the competition, and a wiser man would have despaired. He had, however, a happy mixture of pliability and perseverance in his nature. He was in form and spirit like a supplejack, yielding but tough. Though he bent, he never broke, and though he bowed beneath the slightest pressure, yet, the moment it was way, Jack! He was as erect and carried his head as high as ever. To have taken the field openly against his rival would have been madness, for he was not a man to be thwarted in his armours, any more than the stormy lover Achilles. Ichabod, therefore, made his advances in quite a gently insinuating manner. Under cover of his character of singing master, he made frequent visits to the farmhouse. Not that he had anything to apprehend from the meddlesome interference of parents, which is so often a stumbling block in the path of lovers. Bolt Van Tassel was an easily indulgent soul. He loved his daughter better even than his pipe, and, like a reasonable man and an excellent father, let her have her way in everything. His notable little wife, too, had enough to do to attend to her housekeeping and manage her poultry. For, as she sagely observed, ducks and geese are foolish things and must be looked after, but girls can take care of themselves. Yes, we certainly can. Ha ha. Hello, Moonshade! Wonderful to make your acquaintance once more this evening, though I must say slightly tardy. Spare the rod and spoil the merfolk. Thus, while the busy dame bustled about the house, or plied a spinning wheel at one end of the piazza, honest Bolt would sit smoking on his evening pipe at the other, watching the achievements of a little wooden warrior, who, armed with a sword in each hand, was most valiantly fighting the wind on the pinnacle of the barn. In the meantime, Ichabod would carry on his suit with the daughter by the side of the spring under the great elm, or sauntering along in the twilight, that hour so favourable to the lover's eloquence. I profess not to know how women's hearts are wooed and won. To me, they've always been matters of riddle and admiration. Some seem to have but one vulnerable point, or door of access, while others have 1,000 avenues, and may be captured in 1,000 different ways. It is a great triumph of skill to gain the former, but a still greater proof of generalship to maintain possession of the latter, for man must battle for his fortress at every door and window. He who wins 1,000 common hearts is therefore entitled to some renown, but he who keeps undisputed sway over the heart of a coquette is indeed a hero. Certain it is, this was not the case with the redoubtable Brom Bones, and from the moment Ichabod Crane made his advances, the interests of the former evidently declined. His horse was no longer seen tied to the palings on Sunday nights, and a deadly feud gradually arose between him and the preceptor of Sleepy Hollow. Brom, who had a degree of rough chivalry of his nature, would faith have carried matters to open warfare, and have settled their pretensions to the lady, according to the mode and the most concise and simple reasoners, the knights errant of yore, by single combat. But Ichabod, was too conscious of the superior might of his adversary to enter the lists against him. He had overheard a boast of Bones that he would double the schoolmaster up and lay him on the shelf of his own schoolhouse, and he who was too wary to give him an opportunity. There was something extremely provoking in this obstinately pacific system. It left Brom no alternative but to draw upon the funds of rustic waggery in his disposition, and to play off boorish practical jokes upon his rival. Ichabod became the object of whimsical persecution to Bones and his gang of rough riders. They harried his hitherto peaceful domains, smoked out his singing school by stopping up the chimney, broke into the schoolhouse at night, in spite of its formidable fastenings of withe and window stakes, and turned everything topsy-turvy, so that the poor schoolmaster began to think all the witches in the country held their meetings there. He even stole the last can of roast beast. But what was still more annoying, Brom took all opportunities of turning him into ridicule in presence of his mistress, that had a scoundrel dog whom he taught to whine in the most ludicrous manner, and introduced as a rival of Ichabod's to instruct her in psalmody. In this way matters went on for some time, without producing any material effect on the relative situations of the contending powers. On a fine autumnal afternoon, Ichabod, in a pensive mood, sat enthroned on the lofty stool from whence he usually watched all of the concerns of his literary realm. In his hand he swayed a ferule, the sceptre of despotic power. The birch of justice reposed on 3 nails behind the throne, a constant terror to evildoers, while on the desk before him might be seen sundry contraband articles and prohibited weapons detected upon the persons of idle urchins, such as half-munched apples, pop-guns, whirligigs, fly-cages, and whole legions of rampant little paper gamecocks. Apparently, there had been some appalling act of justice recently inflicted, for his scholars were all busily intent upon their books, or slyly whispering behind them with one eye kept upon the master, and a kind of buzzing stillness reigned throughout the schoolroom. It was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of a negro in tow-cloth jacket and trousers, a round-crowned fragment of a hat, like the cap of Mercury, and mounted on the back of a ragged, wild, half-broken colt, which he managed with a rope by way of halter. He came clattering up to the school door with an invitation to Ichabod to attend merrymaking or quilting frolic, to be held that evening at Mynheer Van Tassel's, and, having delivered his message with that of an air of importance, an effort at fine language, which a negro is apt to display on petty embassies of the kind, he dashed over the book, and was seen scampering away up the hollow, full of the importance and hurry of his mission. All was now bustle and hubbub in the late quiet schoolroom. The scholars were hurried through their lessons without stopping at trifles. Those who were nimble skipped over half with impunity, and those who were tardy had a smart application now and then in the rear to quicken their speed or help them over a tall word. Books were flung aside without being put away on the shelves. Inkstands were overturned, benches thrown down, and the whole school was turned loose an hour before the usual time, bursting forth like a legion of young imps, yelping and racketing about the green in joy at an early emancipation. The gallant Ichabod now spent at least an extra half-hour at his toilette, brushing and furbishing up his best, and indeed only suit of rusty black, and arranging his locks by a bit of broken-looking glass that hung up in the schoolhouse. That he might make his appearance before his mistress in the true style of a cavalier, he borrowed a horse from the farmer with whom he was domiciliated, a choleric old Dutchman of the name of Hans van Ripper, and thus gallantly mounted, issued forth like a knight-errant in quest of adventures. But it is meet I should, in the true spirit of romantic stories, give some account of the looks and equipments of my hero and his steed. The animal he bestrode was a broken-down plough horse that had outlived almost everything but its viciousness. He was gaunt and shagged, with a ewe-neck and a head like a hammer. His rusty mane and tail were tangled and knotted with burrs. One eye had lost its pupil, and was glaring and spectral, but the other had the gleam of a genuine devil in it. Still, he must have had fire and metal in his day, if we may judge from the name he bore of Gunpowder. He had, in fact, been a favourite steed of his master's, the choleric Van Ripper, who was a furious rider, and had infused very probably some of his own spirit into the animal, for, old and broken down as he looked, there was more of the lurking evil in him than any young filly in the country. Thank you so very much for the gifting and liking and commenting and following. My goodness, you're all just so generous tonight. Thank you so very much for being here. I do appreciate all of you. My goodness. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be reading and regaling tales for some new friends this evening, and old friends indeed. Ichabod was a suitable figure for such a steed. He rode with short stirrups, which brought his knees nearly up to the pommel of the saddle. His sharp elbows stuck out like grasshoppers. He carried his whip perpendicularly in his hand, like a sceptre. As the horse jogged on, the motion of his arms was not unlike the flapping of a pair of wings. A small wool hat rested on the top of his nose, for so his scanty strip of forehead might be called, and the skirts of his black coat fluttered out almost to the horse's tail. Such was the appearance of Ichabod and his steed as they shambled out of the gate of Hans van Ripper, and it was altogether such an apparition as is seldom to be met with in broad daylight. It was, as I have said, a fine autumnal day. The sky was clear and serene, and nature wore that rich and golden livery which we always associate with the idea of abundance. The forest had put on their sober brown and yellow, whilst some trees of the tenderer kind had been nipped by the frost into brilliant dyes of orange, purple, and scarlet. Streaming files of wild ducks began to make their appearance high in the air, and the bark of a squirrel might be heard from the groves of beech and hickory nuts, and the pensive whistle of the quail at intervals from the neighbouring stubble field. The small birds were taking their farewell banquets. In the fullness of their revelry, they fluttered, chirping and frolicking from bush to bush, and tree to tree, capricious from the very profusion and variety around them. There was the honest cock-robin, a favourite game of stripling sportsmen, with its loud, querulous note, and the twittering blackbirds flying in sable clouds, and the golden-winged woodpecker with his crimson crest, his broad black gorget, and splendid plumage, and the cedar bird, with its red-tipped wings and yellow-tipped tail, and its little Montero cap of feathers, and the blue jay, the noisy coxcomb, in his gay light blue coat and white underclothes, screaming and chattering, nodding and bobbing and bowing and pretending to be on good terms with every songster of the grove. As Ichabod jogged slowly on his way, his eye, ever open to every symptom of culinary abundance, ranged with delight over the treasures of jolly Odom. On all sides he beheld vast stores of apples, some hanging in oppressive opulence on the trees, some gathered into baskets and barrels for market, others heaped up in rich piles for the cider press. Farther on he beheld great fields of Indian corn, with its golden ears peeping from the leafy coverts, and holding out the promises of cakes and hasty pudding, and the yellow pumpkins lying beneath them, turning up the fair round bellies to the sun, and giving ample prospects the fragrant buckwheat fields breathing the odour of the beehive. And, as he beheld them, soft anticipation stole over his mind of dainty slapjacks, well buttered, and garnished with honey and treacle by the delicate little dimpled hand of Katrina Van Tassel. Thus feeding his mind with many sweet thoughts and sugared suppositions, he journeyed along the sides of a range of hills which took out upon some of the goodliest scenes of the mighty Hudson. The sun gradually wheeled his broad disk down in the west. The wide bosom of the Tappan Zee lay motionless and glassy, excepting that here and there a gentle undulation waved and prolonged the blue shadow of the distant mountain. A few amber clouds floated in the sky without a breath of air to move them. The horizon was of a fine golden tint, changing gradually to a pure apple green, and from that into deep blue of the mid-heaven. A slanting grey lingered on the woody crests of the precipices that overhung some parts of the river, giving greater depth to the dark grey and purple of the rocky sides. A sloop was loitering in the distance, dropping slowly down with the tide, her sail hanging uselessly against the mast, and as a reflection of the sky gleamed along the still water, it seemed as if the vessel was suspended in the air. 8K! My goodness! 8,000 likes! Thank you so very much! My goodness! And roses and little treats! Oh, what a delight! Thank you very much. Twitch and TikTok, and if anyone's watching over on YouTube, I appreciate you as well. It is quite new to be streaming to several different platforms at the same time, and so if I've forgotten about you, YouTube, I deeply apologize. Now, it was toward evening that Ichabod arrived at the castle of Herr Van Tassel, which he found thronged with the pride and flower of the adjacent country. Old farmers, a spare leathern-faced race, in homespun coats and breeches, blue stockings, huge shoes, and magnificent pewter buckles. Their brisk, withered little dames, in close-crimped caps, long-waisted short gowns, homespun petticoats, with scissors and pin-cushions and gay calico pockets hanging on the outside. Buxom lasses, almost as antiquated as their mothers, excepting where a straw hat, a fine ribbon, or perhaps a white frock gave symptoms of city innovation. The sons, in short square-skirted coats, with rows of stupendous brass buttons, and their hair generally queued in the fashion of the time, especially if they could procure an eelskin for the purpose, it being esteemed throughout the country as a potent nourisher and strengthener of the hair. Brom Bones, however, was the hero of the scene, having come to the gathering of his favourite steed, Daredevil, a creature like himself, full of mettle and mischief, and which no one but himself could manage. He was in fact noted for preferring vicious animals, given to all kinds of tricks which kept the rider in constant risk of his neck, for he held a tractable, well-broken horse as unworthy of a lad of spirit. You are from Florida, my goodness, well. Where is everyone hailing from? I'm from the Siren Grotto. I am the librarian of the West Wing of the grotto. I am the historian. I take care of all the stories and the maths and the bookkeeping and all of the delightful things that keep everything running in the house of Nightshade as well. California? 9,000 now, my goodness. Oklahoma, where the wind goes sweeping down the plain. Oh, I simply adore it. From Texas, of course. The west coast of Canada. Ah, oh, Canada. Better than blame Canada, I suppose. Right then. Fain would I pause, dwell upon the world of charms that burst upon the enraptured gaze of my hero, as he entered the state parlour of Van Tassel's mansion. Not those of the bevy of buxom lasses, with their luxurious display of red and white, but the ample charms of a genuine Dutch country tea table in the sumptuous time of autumn. Such heaped-up platters of cakes of various and most indescribable kinds, known only to experienced Dutch housewives. There was the doughty doughnut, the tender oly koek, and the crisp and crumbling krella, sweet cakes and short cakes, ginger cakes and honey cakes, and the whole family of cakes. And then there were apple pies, and peach pies, and pumpkin pies, besides slices of ham and smoked beef, and moreover delectable dishes of preserved plum, peaches and pears and quinces, not to mention broiled shad and roasted chickens, together with bowls of milk and cream, all mingled higgledy-piggledy, pretty much as I have enumerated them, with the motherly teapot sending up its clouds of vapour from the mist. Heavens bless the mark! I want breath and time to discuss this banquet as it deserves, and I am too eager to get on with the story. Happily, Ichabod Crane was not in so great a hurry as his historian, but did ample justice to every dainty. He was a kind and thankful creature, whose heart dilated in proportion as his skin was filled with good cheer, and whose spirits rose with eating, as some men's do with drink. He could not help, too, rolling his large eyes round him as he ate, and chuckling with the possibility that he might one day be lord of all this scene of almost unimaginable luxury and splendour. Then he thought how soon he'd turn his back upon the old schoolhouse, snap his fingers in the face of Hans von Ripper and every other niggardly patron, and kick any itinerant pedagogue out of doors that should dare to call him comrade. Thank you so very much for following on TikTok. I do appreciate that. I saw that. Old Baltus von Tassel moved about amongst his guests with a face dilated with content and good humour, round and jolly as the harvest moon. His hospitable attentions were brief, but expressive, being confined to the shake of a hand, a slap on the shoulder, a loud laugh, and a pressing invitation to fall to and help themselves. And now the sound of music from the common room or hall summoned to the dance. The musician was an old grey-headed man who had been the itinerant orchestra of the neighbourhood for more than half a century. His instrument was as old and battered as himself. The greater part of the time he scraped on 2 or 3 strings, accompanying every movement of the bow with a motion of the head, bowing almost to the ground and stamping with his foot whenever a fresh couple were to start. Ichabod prided himself upon dancing as much upon his vocal prowess. Not a limb, not a fibre about him was idle, and to have seen his loosely hung frame in full motion and clattering about the room, you would have thought St. Vitus himself, that blessed patron of the dance, was figuring before you in person. He was the admiration of all the men, who, having gathered of all ages and sizes from the farm at the neighbourhood, stood forming a pyramid of shining black faces at every door and window, gazing with delight at the scene, rolling their white eyeballs and showing grinning rows of ivory from ear to ear. How could the flogger of urchins be otherwise than animated and joyous? The lady of his heart was his partner in the dance, and smiling graciously in reply to all his amorous oglings, while Brom Bones, sorely smitten with love and jealousy, sat brooding by himself in one corner. When the dance was at an end, Ichabod was attracted to a knot of the sager folks, who, with old Van Tassel, sat smoking at one end of the piazza, gossiping over former times, and drawing out long stories about the war. This neighbourhood, at the time of which I am speaking, was one of those highly favoured places which abound with chronicle and great men. The British and American line had run near it during the war. It had, therefore, been the scene of marauding and infested with refugees, cowboys, and all kinds of border chivalry. Just sufficient time had elapsed to enable such storyteller to dress up his tale with a little becoming fiction, and, in the indistinctness of his recollection, to make himself the hero of every exploit. There was the story of Dofue Marley, a large blue-bearded Dutchman, who had nearly taken a British frigate with an old iron 9-pounder from the mud breastwork, only that his gun burst at the 6th discharge. And there was an old gentleman who shall be nameless, being too rich a mynheer to lightly mentioned, who, in the Battle of White Plains, being an excellent master of defence, parried a musket ball and a small sword, insomuch that he absolutely felt it whiz round the blade and glance off with the hilt, in proof of which he was ready at any time to show the sword with the hilt a little bent. There were several more that had been equally great in the field, not one of whom was persuaded that he had considerable hand in bringing the war to a happy termination. But in all these were nothing to the tales of ghosts and apparitions that succeeded. The neighbourhood is rich in legendary treasures of the kind. Local tales and superstitions thrive best in these sheltered, long-settled retreats, but are trampled underfoot by the shifting throng that forms the population of most of our country places. Besides, there is no encouragement for ghosts in most of our villages, for they have scarcely had time to finish their first nap and turn themselves in their graves before their surviving friends have travelled away from the neighbourhood, so that when they turn out at night to walk their rounds, they have no acquaintance left to call upon. This is perhaps the reason why we so seldom hear of ghosts, except in our long-established Dutch communities. My goodness, what is going on with this chat? 10,000! Oh my stars! Your brain's checked out for the day. My goodness. Well, my brain certainly is not checked out for the day. It's checked out for a lifetime. It's checked out for an eternity. My goodness. My goodness. Siren woke me up at the crack of 8 a.m. And we have been going ever since. You didn't even have a brain today. Oh my goodness, darling. Emily. I certainly did. I had to have one for the both of us. My goodness, Siren could barely keep herself together while I'm over here keeping all of these records, editing things, throwing things together, listing items for sale, and apparently holding the artiste formerly known as Emily together as well. Oh, goodness. It was quite a day. But, and if you are just joining us, thank you so very much for being here. My name, on every other night of the week, is Sirenofsound. Heather the Siren. Just don't call me late for supper. But on Thursday evenings, I moonlight as the Lady Scarlett Nightshade, and I regale you with tales from the grimoire, old and new, and demonstrate voiceover work. I'm also the spokeswoman. The spokeswoman for our jewellery shop, Nightshade and Company, founded in 1617 by the House of Nightshade, as they were seafaring merchants on the docks before they became purveyors of fine various and sundry for the general public, though it was a front for a fierce vampiric gang. Scream Queen has entered the chat. Vampire VTuber, hello. Thank you so very much for gifting tonight as well. Thank you ever so much for taking very good care of the stream tonight. Oh, thank you so very much. Righto then, let's continue on with the story. And if you are just joining us tonight, we are reading The Wonderful Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. And it was, of course, by request of our wonderful Elegant Savages on Patreon. If you would like a say in the next thing that we read, and would like to make requests on music nights, please check out the link in my bio. It's the second one in the link tree. Thank you so very much for following, Peaches. I do appreciate it. My goodness, all the roses. It is such an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, darling. Please let us know where you're all from. You relate with the Scarecrow at the Wizard of Oz, and why is that? Do you not have a brain this evening? Reading an electronic book, heresy. Well, I certainly had to modernize quite quickly. Shaquille Oatmeal. I do enjoy that username, though, I will say. Fresno. Ah, wonderful, Cindy. Obviously, the depths of hell. Well, I did have to modernize. I do spend quite a bit of time at the quill, and, of course, I was around for the invention of the typewriter and the word processor. It was only a matter of time before we moved to an electronic tablet such as this. And so, the grimoire is just as modern and wonderful as these little TikTok streams and Twitch streams themselves. Eli Whitney was an all-right guy. He was. I think I only met him once or twice, though I must say I did prefer the company of Walt Whitman. More of a literary than a person of the land, you know. Right then, let's continue on with the tale. Do you know that we are, I shall share with you, we are 69% of the way through the story. Do with that information what you will. The immediate cause, however, of the prevalence of supernatural stories in these parts was doubtless owing to the vicinity of Sleepy Hollow. There was a contagion in the very air that blew from the haunted region. It breathed forth an atmosphere of dreams and fancies infecting all the land. Several of the Sleepy Hollow people were present at Von Tassel's, and, as usual, were doling out their wild and wonderful legends. Many dismal tales were told about funeral trains, and mourning cries and wailings heard and seen about the great tree where the unfortunate Major Andre was taken, and which stood in the neighborhood. Some mention was made also of the woman in white, the haunted the dark glen at Raven Rock, and was often heard to shriek on winter nights before a storm, having perished there in the snow. The chief part of the stories, however, turned upon the favourite spectre of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman, who had been several times of late patrolling the country, and, it was said, tethered his horse nightly among the graves in the churchyard. The sequestered situation of this church seems always to have made it a favourite haunt of troubled spirits. It stands on a knoll, surrounded by locust trees and lofty elms, from among which its decent whitewashed walls shine modestly forth, like Christian purity beaming through the shades of retirement. A gentle slope descends from it to a silver sheet of water, bordered by high trees, between which peeps may be caught at the blue hills of the Hudson. To look upon its grass-grown yard, where the sunbeams seem to sleep so quietly, one would think that there at least the dead might rest in peace. On one side of the church extends a wide woody dell, along which raves a large brook among broken rocks and trunks of fallen trees. Over a deep black part of the stream, not far from the church, was formerly thrown a wooden bridge. The broad that led to it, and the bridge itself, were thickly shaded by overhanging trees, which cast a gloom about it, even in the daytime, but occasioned a fearful darkness at night. Such was one of the favourite haunts of the Headless Horseman, and the place where he was most frequently encountered. The tale was told of old Brower, a most heretical disbeliever in ghosts, how he met the horseman returning from his foray into Sleepy Hollow and was obliged to get up behind him, how they galloped over brush and brake, over hill and swamp, until they reached the bridge, when the horseman suddenly turned into a skeleton, threw old Brower into the brook, and sprang way over the treetops with a clap of thunder. The story was immediately matched by a thrice marvellous adventure of Brom Bones, who made light of the galloping Hessian as an arrant jockey. He affirmed that on returning one night from the neighbouring village of Sing Sing, he had been overtaken by the midnight trooper, that he had offered to race with him for a bowl of punch, and should have won it too, for Daredevil beat the goblin horse all hollow. But just as they came to the church bridge, the Hessian bolted and vanished in a flash of fire. All these tales, told in that drowsy undertone with which men talk in the dark, countenances of the listeners, only now and then receiving a casual gleam from the glare of a pipe, sank deep in the mind of Ichabod. He repaid them in kind with large extracts from his invaluable author, Cotton Mather, and added many marvelous events that had taken place in the native state of Connecticut, and fearful sights which he had seen in his nightly walks about Sleepy Hollow. The revel now gradually broke up. The old farmers gathered together their families in their wagons, and were heard for some time rattling along the hollow roads, over the distant hills. Some of the damsels mounted on pillons behind their favourite swains, and their light-hearted laughter, mingling with the clatter of hooves, echoed along the silent woodlands, sounding fainter and fainter until they gradually died away, and the late scene of noise and frolic was all silent and deserted. Ichabod only lingered behind, according to the custom of country lovers, to have a tete-a-tete with the heiress, fully convinced that he was now on the high road to success. What passed at this interview I will not pretend to say, for in fact I don't know. Something, however, I fear me, must have gone wrong, for he certainly sallied forth, after no very great interval, with an air quite desolate and chapfallen. Oh, these women! These women! Could that girl have been playing off any of her coquettish tricks? Was her encouragement of the poor pedagogue all a mere sham to secure her conquest of his rival? Heaven only knows, not I. Let it suffice to say, Ichabod stole forth with the air of one who had been sacking a hen-roost rather than a fair lady's heart. Without looking to the right or left to notice the scene of rural wealth, on which he had so often gloated, he went straight to the stable, and with several hearty cuffs and kicks roused his steed most uncourteously from the comfortable quarters in which he was soundly sleeping, dreaming of mountains of corn and oats, and whole valleys of timothy and clover. Stitch is here! My goodness! 124 something? I missed it. My goodness, please do say it again. And thank you, Twitch, for being here as well. My goodness. Well, I do appreciate all of you being on the stream and attending. Thank you so very much. My goodness, it is such a pleasure to be reading for you tonight. Once again and every Thursday evening in the Siren Grotto from the West Wing Library of the Grotto. All right, my darlings, I am going to do something here. Nightshade and Company is in the chat, and I'm going to say something right now. Hello, darlings. If you would please all follow the House of Nightshade, right there, Nightshade and Company. That is the jewelry shop. Jewelry and accessories, various and sundry, for the dark aesthetic, since 1617. Loving every moment of it. Wonderful. Your makeup's so flawless tonight. Why, thank you, darling. Thank you so very much. Already do. Thank you, Moonshade. I do appreciate it. Well, I can certainly excuse an evening of tardiness in exchange for a follow. I must give you a little bit of a ribbing. I don't think we've done anything with you before. I know. Safe this time. Woohoo! What is woohoo? Oh my goodness, we're over 11,000 likes on TikTok. Thank you so very much. Thank you for pinning a comment. I do appreciate that. All right then. Shall we delve back into the tale? wouldn't expect anything less. Oh, goodness, well, all right. Are we going to continue on, then? Let's do it, shall we? Though, Scream Queen, I will say, this is actually my second makeup of the day. Oh, goodness. Well, if I am to stay in character, then it would be my first makeup of the day, and Siren's second. It has been quite a long day of content creation for you all. And a bit of a sponsored content that unfortunately is for a private client and won't be able to share with you. You're exhausted after doing your makeup once? Oh, darling. That's getting with it in content creating. Oh my goodness, yes indeed. All right. Even worse with hair. Oh, indeed. Indeed, I do not deal with hair whatsoever, I will say. Wigs, fells, and all of that, and of course haberdashery, are my very best friends, I must tell you. Well, now let's continue the tale. We only have a little over 20% of the story left over. I only do my makeup once. Hello, Leslie Lynn. You think everyone left? Oh, darling. Well, Leslie, I will tell you, darling, the party apparently is over on TikTok. My goodness. But on Twitch, I do appreciate you being there so very much, and I am trying to address you. I see 4 viewers on Twitch, though I think everyone's either lurking or have moved over to TikTok. Good night, Stitch. Crazy Froaty 7, hello, darling. Thank you for joining the stream tonight. How are you? And from whence do you hail? No worries. All right, Leslie. Well, thank you so very much for following. I do appreciate it, love. Oh, my goodness. I do appreciate you being there on Twitch. You're holding down the fort, as it were. Emily's there. All right, then. Let's continue on with the tale of Ichabod Crane in the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Cheers, everyone. All right. It was the very witching time of night that Ichabod, heavily hearted and crestfallen, pursued his travels homewards along the sides of the lofty hills which rise above Tarrytown, and which he had traversed so cheerily in the afternoon. The hour was as dismal as himself. So far below him the Tappan Zee spread its dusky and indistinct waste of waters, with here and there the tall mast of a sloop riding quietly at anchor under the land. In the dead hush of midnight he could even hear the barking of the watchdog from the opposite shore of the Hudson, but it was so vague and faint as only to give an idea of his distance from the faithful companion of man. Now and then, too, the long-drawn crowing of the cock, accidentally awakened, would sound far, far off, from some farmhouse way among the hills. But it was like a dreaming sound in his ear. No signs of life occurred near him, but occasionally the melancholy chirp of a cricket, or perhaps the guttural twang of a bullfrog from the neighbouring marsh, as if sleeping uncomfortably and turning suddenly in his bed. All the stories of ghosts, and goblins that he had heard in the afternoon now came crowding upon his recollection. Ah, Leslie Lynn, you've made it over to TikTok. It was quite lonely over on Twitch, wasn't it? Though I do appreciate you being there. Well, welcome to TikTok, darling. Hello, my goodness. Wonderful to see you tonight, Sunday. No signs of life occurred near him, but occasionally the melancholy chirp of a cricket, or perhaps the guttural twang of a bullfrog from a neighbouring marsh, as if sleeping uncomfortably and turning suddenly in his bed. All the stories of ghosts and goblins that he had heard in the afternoon now came crowding upon his recollection. The night grew darker and darker. The stars seemed to sink deeper in the sky, and driving clouds occasionally hid them from his sight. He had never felt so lonely and dismal. He was, moreover, approaching the very place where many of the scenes of the ghost stories had been laid. In the centre of the road stood an enormous tulip tree, which towered like a giant above all the other trees of the neighbourhood, and formed a kind of landmark. Its limbs were gnarled and fantastic, large enough to form trunks for ordinary trees, twisting down almost to the earth, and rising again into the air. It was connected with the tragical story of the unfortunate Andre, who had been taken prisoner hard by, and was universally known by the name of Major Andre's tree. The common people regarded it with a mixture of respect and superstition, partly out of sympathy for the fate of its ill-starred namesake, and partly from the tales of strange sights and doleful lamentations told concerning it. As Ichabod approached this fearful tree, he began to whistle. He thought his whistle was answered. It was but a blast sweeping sharply through the dry branches. As he approached a little nearer, he thought he saw something white, hanging in the midst of the tree. He paused and ceased whistling, but, on looking more narrowly, perceived that it was a place where the tree had been scathed by lightning, and the white wood laid bare. Suddenly he heard a groan. His teeth chattered, and his knees smote against the saddle. It was but the rubbing of one huge bough upon another, as they were swayed about by the breeze. He passed the tree in safety, but the new perils lay before him. About 200 yards from the tree, a small brook crossed the road and ran into a marshy and thickly wooded glen, known by the name of Wiley's Swamp. A few rough logs, laid side by side, served for a bridge over the stream. On that side of the road where the brook entered the wood, a group of oaks and chestnuts, matted thick with wild grapevines, threw a cavernous gloom over it. To pass this bridge was the severest trial. It was an identical spot that the unfortunate Andre was captured, and under the covert of these chestnuts and vines were the sturdy yeomen concealed who surprised him. This has never since been considered a haunted stream, and fearful are the feelings of the schoolboy who has to pass it alone after dark. I saw haunted stream. I just read the term haunted stream. I wonder what it would be like if we had haunted aubergines in the chat every time we heard the word haunted from here out. Wouldn't that be a little bit of a fun game? I am going to turn on some more music because I believe we've lost it. And we certainly have. Oh my goodness, oh no. All right, the Dark Era Forest Path. I believe that's going to be our winner. Read the story. All right. I shall. We're almost finished. Almost at the climax. Here we are. About 200 yards from the tree, a small brook crossed the road and ran into a marshy and thickly wooded glen, known by the name of Wiley's Swamp. A few rough logs, laid side by side, served for a bridge over this stream. On that side of the road where the brook entered the wood, a group of oak and chestnuts There we are. A group of oaks and chestnuts, matted thick with wild grapevines, threw a cavernous gloom over it. To pass this bridge was the severest trial. It was at this identical spot that the unfortunate Andre was captured, and under the covert of those chestnuts and vines were the sturdy yeomen concealed who surprised him. This has ever since been considered a haunted stream, and fearful are the feelings of the schoolboy who has to pass it alone after dark. As he approached the stream, his heart began to thump. He summoned up, however, all his resolution, gave his horse half a score of kicks in the ribs, and attempted to dash briskly across the bridge. But instead of starting forward, the perverse old animal made a lateral movement and ran broadside against the fence. Ichabod, whose fears increased with the delay, jerked the reins on the other side and kicked lustily with the contrary foot. It was all in vain. His steed started, it is true, but it was only to plunge in the opposite side of the road into a thicket of brambles and alder bushes. The schoolmaster now bestowed both whip and heel upon the starveling ribs of old Gunpowder, who dashed forward, snuffling and snorting, but came to a stand just by the bridge, with a suddenness that had nearly sent his rider sprawling over his head. Just at this moment, a splashed tramp by the side of the bridge caught the sensitive ear of Ichabod. In the dark shadow of the grove, on the margin of the brook, he beheld something huge, misshapen, and towering. It stirred not, but seemed gathered up in the gloom, like some gigantic monster ready to spring upon the traveller. The hair of the affrighted pedagogue rose upon his head with terror. What was to be done? To turn and fly was now too late, and besides, what chance was there of escaping ghost or goblin, if such it was, who could ride upon the wings of the wind? Summoning up, therefore, a show of courage, he demanded in stammering accents, "Who are you?" He received no reply. He repeated his demand in a still more agitated voice. Still, there was no answer. Once more he cudgelled the sides of the inflexible Gunpowder, and, shutting his eyes, broke forth with an involuntary fervour into a psalm tune. Just then the shadowy object of alarm put itself in motion, and, with a scramble and a bound, stood at once in the middle of the road. Though the night was dark and dismal, yet the form of unknown might now in some degree be ascertained. He appeared to be a horseman of large dimensions, and mounted on a black horse and a powerful frame. He made no offer of molestation or sociability, but kept aloof on one side of the road, jogging along on the blind side of old Gunpowder, who had now got over his fright and waywardness. Ichabod, who had no relish for the strange midnight companion, and bethought himself of the adventure of Brom Bones with the galloping Hessian, now quickened his steed in hopes of leaving him behind. All right, I am going to say that out loud because that is delightful. Live or die in the tale of the midnight ride, where reality and superstition collide. Ooh, my goodness. All right, well. There we are. The stranger, however, quickened his horse to an equal pace. Ichabod pulled up and fell into a walk, thinking to lag behind. The other did the same. His heart began to sink within him. He endeavoured to resume his psalm tune, but his parched tongue clove to the roof of his mouth, and he could not utter a stave. There was something in the moody and dogged silence of this pertinacious companion that was mysterious and appalling. It was soon fearfully accounted for. On mounting and rising ground, which brought the figure of his fellow traveller in relief against the sky, gigantic in height and muffled in a cloak, Ichabod was horror-struck on perceiving that he was headless. But his horror was still more increased on observing that the head, which should have rested on his shoulders, was carried before him in the pommel of his saddle. His terror rose to desperation. He rained a shower of kicks and blows upon Gunpowder, hoping by sudden movement to give his companion the slip. But the spectre fully started full jump with him. Oh, away then they dashed through the thick and thin, stones flying and sparks flashing at every bound. Ichabod's flimsy garments fluttered in the air as he stretched his long, lank body away, his horse's head in the eagerness of flight. They had now reached the road which turns off to Sleepy Hollow. But Gunpowder, who seemed possessed with a demon, instead of keeping up it, made an opposite turn and plunged headlong downhill to the left. His road leads through a sandy hollow shaded by trees for about a quarter of a mile, where it crosses the bridge famous in goblin stories. And just beyond swells the green knoll in which stands the whitewashed church. And as yet the panic of the steed had given his unskilful rider an apparent advantage in the chase. But just as he had got halfway through the hollow, the girths of the saddle gave way, and he felt it slipping from under him. He seized it by the pommel, endeavoured to hold it firm, but in vain, and he had just time to save himself by clasping old Gunpowder round the neck, when the saddle fell to the earth, and he held it trampled underfoot by his pursuer. For a moment the terror of Hans von Ripper's breath passed across his mind, for it was his Sunday saddle. But it was no time for petty fears. The goblin was hard on his haunches, and, unskilful rider that he was, he had much ado to maintain his seat, sometimes slipping on one side, sometimes on another, sometimes jolted on the high ridge of the horse's backbone, with a violence that he verily feared would cleave him asunder. An opening in the trees now cheered him with the hopes that the church bridge was at hand. The wavering reflection of a silver star on the bosom of the brook told him he was not mistaken. He saw the walls of the church dimly glaring under the trees beyond. He collected a place where Brom Bones' ghostly competitor had disappeared. If I can but reach that bridge, thought Ichabod, I'm safe. Just then he heard the black steed panting and blowing close behind him. He even fancied he felt his hot breath. Another convulsive kick in the ribs, and old Gunpowder sprang upon the bridge. He thundered over the resounding planks. He gained the opposite side, and now Ichabod cast a look behind to see if his pursuer would vanish, according to the rule, in a flash of fire and brimstone. Just then he saw the goblin rising in his stirrups, and in the very act of hurling his head at him. Ichabod endeavored to dodge the horrible missile, but too late. It encountered his cranium with a tremendous crash. He was stumbled headlong into the dust, and Gunpowder, the black steed, and the goblin rider passed by like a whirlwind. The next morning, the horse was found without his saddle, and with the bridle under his feet, soberly cropping the grass at his master's gate. Ichabod did not make his appearance at breakfast. Dinner hour came, but no Ichabod. The boys assembled at the schoolhouse and strolled idly about the banks of the brook, but no schoolmaster. Hans von Ripper now began to feel some uneasiness about the fate of poor Ichabod and his saddle. An inquiry was set on foot, and after diligent investigation they came upon his traces. One part of the road leading to the church was found, the saddle trampled in the dirt. The tracks of horses' hoofs deeply dented in the road, and evidently at furious speed, were traced to the bridge, beyond which, on the bank of the broad part of the brook, where the water ran deep and black, was found the hat of the unfortunate Ichabod, and close beside it, a shattered pumpkin. The brook was searched, but the body of the schoolmaster was not to be discovered. Hans von Ripper, as executor of his estate, examined the bundle which contained all his worldly effects. They consisted of 2 shirts and a half, 2 stocks for the neck, a pair or 2 of worsted stockings, an old pair of corduroy small clothes, a rusty razor, a book of psalm tunes and full of dog's ears, and a broken pitch pipe. As to the books and furniture of the schoolhouse, they belonged to the community, excepting Cotton Mather's History of Witchcraft, a New England almanac, and a book of dreams and fortune-telling, in which last was a sheet of foolscap much scribbled and blotted in several fruitless attempts to make a copy of verses in honour of the heiress of Von Tassel. These magic books and the poetic scroll were forthwith consigned to the flames by Hans von Ripper, who, from that time forward, determined to send his children no more to school, observing that he no longer knew any good come of this same reading and writing. Whatever money the schoolmaster possessed, and he had received his quarter's pay but a day or 2 before, he must have had about his person at that time of his disappearance. The mysterious event caused much speculation at the church of the following Sunday. Lots of gazers and gossips were collected in the churchyard, at the bridge, and at the spot where the hat and the pumpkin had been found. The stories of Brewer, of Bones, and the whole budget of others were called to mind, and when they had diligently considered them all, and compared them with the symptoms of the present case, they shook their heads, and came to the conclusion that Ichabod had been carried off by the galloping Hessian. As he was a bachelor, and in nobody's debt, nobody troubled his head any more about him. The school was removed to a different quarter of the hollow, and another pedagogue reigned in his stead. It is true, an old farmer who had been down to New York on a visit several years after, and from whom this account of the ghostly adventure was received, brought home the intelligence that Ichabod Crane was still alive, that he had left the neighborhood partly through fear of the goblin and Hans von Ripper, and partly in mortification at having been suddenly dismissed by the heiress, and he had changed his quarters to a distant part of the country, had kept school and studied law at the same time, had been admitted to the bar, turned politician, electioneered, written for the newspapers, and finally had been made a justice at the 10-pound court. Brombones, too, who, shortly after his rival's disappearance, conducted the blooming Katrina in triumph to the altar, was observed to look exceedingly knowing whenever the story of Ichabod was related, and always burst into a hearty laugh at the mention of the pumpkin, which led some to suspect that he knew more about the matter than he chose to tell. The old country wives, however, who are the best judges of these matters, maintain to this day that Ichabod was spirited away by supernatural means, and it is a favourite story often told about the neighbourhood round the winter evening fire. The bridge became more than ever an object of superstitious awe, and that may be the reason why the road has been altered of late years, so as to approach the church by the border of the mill pond. The schoolhouse, being deserted, soon fell to decay, and was reported to be haunted by the ghost of the unfortunate pedagogue and the ploughboy, loitering homeward of a still summer evening, has often fancied his voice at a distance, chanting a melancholy psalm tune among the tranquil solitudes of Sleepy Hollow. The end. Or is it? Oh, goodness. What a tale. What a triumph. My goodness, indeed. Now, are you on the side of Ichabod Crane? Or were you on the side of Brombones? Do you think it was him that perhaps made him disappear? You are on the side of the Hessian. Ah, indeed. Well, I must admit, I must be as well. After all, we are supernatural creatures round here. Ah, my goodness, well, the grimoire has certainly done us well once again for another Thursday evening. You have questionable taste in men. Well, apparently so do I. Oh, darlings, I do believe I did. In my zeal to tell the story, I quite destroyed some of my hat. Ha! I will have to repair it after the stream, I suppose. You were never sure about Ichabod? What do you mean, you were never sure about him? That was good. Why, thank you. Thank you. That was loads of fun. Oops. Indeed. Whoops, indeed. Oh, my goodness. And where on earth? Do you know, I just now realized towards the very end of the stream, at the very end, I forgot my corset. Ha! You look good. Why, thank you, Christina Wolf. Darling, that is quite a high compliment. Ichabod for sure faked his death. I do believe so. I have to agree with you all there. Whoopsie. Every time I see that word, I think, I'm not hungry. Whoops. You want me to starve? An old man. Don't be silly. See? Scrumptious. Is he a shifty little fellow? Indeed. Righto there. I love Sally too. All right then. Well, I do Sally's voice very. Why, thank you. What else shall I say in Sally's voice? Such a queen for that move. Indeed she was. Oh, yes. The other line that sticks out to me. Sing her song. Oh, goodness. Now am I at the behest of the chat? My dear. Well, one must oblige. Let's go ahead and pull up a little bit of a karaoke, shall we? That was a delight to read for you this evening. Thank you so very much for being here. It seems wrong to me, Jack. All right then. Let's see if we can find it. Sally's song, karaoke. There it is. Ah, yes. Let's see how far we can get. Oh, you love StoryNet. I do as well. I love regaling you with all of these tales. Ah, goodness. Oh, goodness. Well, that's certainly not it. Oh, that's the rock version. That's lots of fun. Ah, here we are. Here's a website I trust. There's blah, 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 blah. I've been doing that kind of move all day long. Just completely messing things up. Cherokee Queen 1, hello, and thank you so very much for following. Well, this was certainly quite the way to ring in December. Let us begin Sally's song with correct words this time. It's wrong to me, Jack. I sound way better than you. Oh, darling, my goodness. Well, I certainly hope so. One of these days we're going to dress as Sally. I've only had a year. Oh, my goodness, yes. Well, here we go. Put me on the spot, shall we? I sense there's something in the wind that feels like tragedies at hand. And though I'd like to stand by him, can't shake this feeling that I have. The worst is just around the bend, and does he notice my feelings for him? And will he see how much he means to me? It's not to be. What will become of my dear friend? Where will his actions lead us then? Although I'd like to join the crowd in their enthusiastic cloud, try as I may, it doesn't last. And will we ever end up together? No, I think not. It's never to become, for I am not the one. Oh, and she goes and picks her little dead flower petals. Oh, and you certainly missed it last week. Was it last week or was it the week before that we actually read the children's novelized version of The Nightmare Before Christmas? It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We decided it would be lots of fun to do something having to do with The Nightmare Before Christmas at some point during the month of November. Because what else do you do between Halloween and Christmas? Thank goodness for Tim Burton and Henry Selick. You were stuck in Walmart. I remember that, Scream Queen. Yes, I remember. I was so very sad that you could not attend, though you tried. Absolutely amazing. Oh, darlings, thank you all so very much. By the way, we do also still have Nightmare Before Christmas merch available if you would like to do a little auction or a little sale today. Just to go out with a bang, you know. Lady Ravana, I am so very sorry that I just am now seeing your username. The chat is so very far away. I love you. Thank you for being on Twitch tonight and being a wonderful moderator. As a matter of fact, everyone, emojis in your respective chats for all of our wonderful moderators. Our Siren Court, as it were, on Twitch and on TikTok. Lots of love for our mods. And that to the list of stuff you want to... Oh, darling, all right. Well, we'll just keep checking off the list. Would you all like to see? Would you all like to see the very first invention that we did as the Siren Grotto? The very first group product for the House of Nightshade. Oh, you are incredible. All right then. All right then. You'll have to forgive, since it is the internet. I have silly leggings on. I don't have my skirt. The Dark Queen, thank you so very much for following. I do appreciate it. All right then, let's go and find them. They won't be charged. They won't be charged up. However, I can still show them to you at least. And I think that you'll really enjoy them. This is a product, there they are, yes. This is a product that is, well, quite honestly, it is the product of a stream chat several weeks ago. Was it maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago that we discussed dreaming up this lovely little thing, some kind of a little design that was going to put Nightshade and Company on the map. And sure enough, we developed as a group the world's first, and only as far as I know, glow-in-the-dark Christmas lights. These are glow-in-the-dark holiday lights that can be used for dorm decor, room decor, on your Christmas tree, anywhere you need a little bit of illumination. And they are handmade by myself. they can be made in any color, and they can be made in just about every color of the rainbow. This one is in moon phases, and Teenage Mooney would love them. Well, she can certainly have them. All right. You can make them in any color you please. These are in moon phases, our example string of lights. And they also come in stars, the classic little green stars that we'd stick on the ceiling as children. Or maybe now, if you're anything like me. Yes, let's add them to the list, Scream Queen, shall we? Oh, darling. Well, we know certainly what Scream Queen's stocking is going to look like this year for Christmas. Oh, goodness. So, they may not be charged up very well here, because we just turned them on. These are indigo colored. Those of you who are in the Siren Grotto Discord did vote on the color. You voted between you voted between blue and purple, and so I mixed the two, split the difference, and made indigo. They are hand-poured resin with a little bit of extra pink and blue gold glowing glitter inside, courtesy of Lady Bravada. Emily, there she is. Oh, goodness. Glow-in-the-dark glitter. Oh, yes, for extra staying power, extra glowing powder. Now, I will say, because these are the prototype, I'm more than happy to put the first edition prototype somewhere in with a new home. However, I do need to photograph and film it much better than I have already. They are already listed on the Nightshade & Company website and also on the Nightshade & Company Etsy store. Members of the Siren Grotto receive them for a special price as one of your Patreon benefits. And those custom, oh yes, I do enjoy resin so very much. All right, I'm going to shut them off and let's see if they glow yet. All right, I'm going to turn off the ring light. It's going to get quite dark. Here we go. Squeaking chair and all. Here we go. Can you see them glowing? Slightly. See, they're not charged up enough. I don't like the purple powder I have. I need to order fresh purple so that they'll glow. They're starting to, yeah. You can see them. You can kind of see them glowing in the middle where the glitter is. The glitter really, really picks up the light. However, the powder itself, the purple powder is not very strong, this brand. So I've ordered some more purple and we're going to try it again, and hopefully this time we'll actually get a better purple glow. Let's turn the lights off again and see what happens. Now they're glowing. You can see the glitter glowing. Ha-ha! Precious. So precious. Last time we did this, it was amazing, right? Well, because they had all day to charge. And here's what's something very exciting about these. Exactly. String them up year round. Never worry about dead batteries ever again. You can charge them up in the sun. Turn them on at night to enjoy the glow from the Christmas lights inside. And then when you shut them off, you can enjoy them even longer. Or when the battery dies, you can enjoy them because they will naturally glow. I think we're on to something here, folks. I do. Yes, I do. And it is all thanks to you all who were in that chat, who invented these little contraptions. Used to have glow nail polish. Oh my goodness. Yes, exactly. I have glow nail polish. It's dark grey. Though I tend to shy away. I have a minor obsession with nail polish and press-on nails. However, I can't wear them very often because Siren plays instruments, and the click, click, click on strings and on piano keys is quite an annoyance. And quite uncomfortable, if I'm being completely honest. It takes minutes for them to really glow. Yes, they do. They do. Now these, because the purple isn't very strong, though the blue is and the glitter is, this prototype can take upwards of 8 hours to charge really well, and even then we don't get the best glow. Nail polish and perfume is your weakness. Oh, darling. My goodness. All right then, everyone. Well, I will be quite honest with you. Siren woke me up at the crack-o 8 a.m. and it is 11 p.m. at this point. And while I am ready to retire for the evening, Siren is still on the clock and under deadlines, believe it or not. She's got 17 videos to edit this evening for delivery to a client by 3 p.m. tomorrow. Oh my, indeed, yes. Well, if it weren't for me, she'd never be on track with anything now, would she? You're ready for a bath in bed. Oh, bath time sounds delightful, doesn't it? Billy Newell, thank you so very much for following. I do appreciate it. And it looks like the Twitch stream is bare bones once again. Are any of us surprised, though? Though I will say that the sound quality, the lighting quality, the camera quality, and the music is all so much more delightful on Twitch. And we have special commands, we have lots of little fun things to do in the chat. This is why we have lists for Siren. It is true. We sit there and we create these unbelievable lists, deliver them to her. And who knows what happens with them after they hit her hot little hands. Or fins, as it were. Quality on Twitch is superior. Why, thank you. And I must agree, I worked very hard on this Twitch stream, I must say. And we're about to do it again because tomorrow, well, I suppose in an hour, December has begun. And that means that the House of Nightshade and the Siren Grotto all receive their holiday makeovers. It is so much fun. Who are you giving newspapers to? Certainly not I. I have nothing to do with it. I'm always on top of things. It's Siren who needs to pay attention much more closely to what's going on with her doings. Yes, ma'am, good night all. Good night, my dear. It was wonderful to see you, and of course, I shall say good night as well. I'm going to say goodnight to Twitch first. Twitch, thank you so very much for being here on stream. I do appreciate all of you so very much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe, do all of the lovely little things that all the little Twitchy people do, and we will see you next time, hopefully for a spooky dance party with Siren Captain and Mr. Siren. Cross your fingers, they are prepared for it. Good night and play.